A government official saw pornography on the internet and built a basement with 7 iron doors to replicate the model, with 6 women inside. An actor went to an audition in Thailand. He was kidnapped, taken across the border into Myanmar, and had his head shaved. Inside were 220,000 people who never chose to be there, and a pop idol with tens of millions of followers who used his fame as a hunting tool for years. His own fans defended him until they couldn't anymore. This is the dark side of China's internet, Volume 2. In 2007, a Chinese government official was browsing the internet. He came across pornography sites. He saw how many people visited them. He saw how much money they generated, and he made a decision. He wasn't going to be a spectator. He was going to build his own business model. What he built was a basement with 7 iron doors, 6 women locked inside, and a webcam connected to the internet. Luoyang, Henan Province, Central China. A city of nearly 7 million people, known for its peonies and its Buddhist temples. A completely ordinary city where no one could have imagined something like this was even possible. Li Hao was born in 1977 in Xinye County, Henan Province. He went to university, earned his degree, and landed a stable job, first as a firefighter, then as an official in the provincial government's technology supervision sector. He had a wife. He had a young son. From the outside, he had a completely normal life. Nobody knew what he had been planning since 2007. In August 2009, Li Hao purchased a residential complex in the Xigong district of Luoyang. He paid in cash. The property had a basement. Over the following months, Li manually excavated an underground structure connected to the basement through a narrow tunnel, 4 meters below ground, less than 20 square meters of space. He installed 7 metal doors, one behind the other, each with its own independent lock. He installed basic ventilation so that the people who would be kept inside could breathe. He installed a bed, a latrine, and eventually a computer with no internet access, so his victims could watch movies and play video games, but with no way to communicate with the outside world. It took him months to build. He did it alone. He planned it with a meticulousness that investigators would later describe as chilling. When he was done, he went looking for his first victim. Between 2009 and 2011, Li Hao abducted 6 women, some of them teenagers. The method was always the same. He would approach women in vulnerable situations in the area, pose as a potential client, and bring them to the residential complex under the promise of work or money. Once they walked through the door, he took them down to the basement. They never came back out. He kept them locked up for periods ranging from 2 months to 21 months. He subjected them to repeated sexual abuse. He forced them into situations involving paying visitors he brought to the location. He fed them once every 2 days, just enough to keep them too weak to resist, but alive. And in March 2011, he installed a computer with a webcam and broadband connection in the basement. What he did next was exactly what he had planned ever since he stumbled across those explicit sites back in 2007. He forced 4 of the women to perform live shows through Tencent QQ, the most popular messaging and video call platform in China at the time, the equivalent of Skype or Zoom. He broadcast in real time to viewers who paid to watch. The rates were straightforward: 50 yuan for 30 minutes, 100 yuan for 50 minutes. Payments came in through Alipay, China's digital payment platform, the equivalent of PayPal. Completely traceable in theory, completely overlooked in practice for months. Li Hao produced the content, he distributed it, he collected the money, and then he went home to his wife and son, where he told them he was working overnight security shifts. By the time of his arrest, he had produced more than 50 videos and had collected thousands of yuan from viewers across China. But the horror doesn't end there. In July 2010, one of the women, Zhang Xuanshuan, attempted to attack him while he was working in the basement. She managed to injure him slightly. Li Hao's response was to force another one of the captives, Duan, to help him take Zhang's life. He promised her that if she did it, he would set her free. She did it, and he never freed Duan. Zhang Xuanshuan's body was buried beneath the bed in the basement. In May 2011, one of the women, Kai, 16, developed a gynecological illness and could no longer participate in the online shows. Li Hao deemed her useless. He subjected her to extreme abuse, including forcing her to ingest feces. She died from the mistreatment. Her body was hidden in a concrete pit inside the basement. In a space of less than 20 square meters, 2 women had died. Their bodies were still there, and the 4 survivors were still locked in with them. On September 2nd, 2011, Li took 3 of the women to a nearby hotel to prostitute them. It was a move he had made before. This time, something changed. One of them, identified only as Ma, managed to escape during the outing. She ran. She made it to the street. She found someone, and she talked. Police arrived at the residential complex that same day. What they found when they opened the 7 iron doors of the basement left investigators speechless. 2 bodies in varying states of decomposition. 3 women alive. in devastating physical condition: the webcam, the computer, the payment records from Alipay. Li Hao tried to flee. He went to borrow money from his sister. He was apprehended on September 6th, 4 days after Ma's escape. When police arrested him, he showed no remorse. He confessed almost immediately, and he explained, with a calm that investigators described as deeply unsettling, that the whole thing had been a business, that he had seen the model on the internet, that he had calculated it could work. The trial was held in November 2012. Li Hao was found guilty of murder, rape, unlawful detention, organizing prostitution, and the production and distribution of illegal pornography for profit. He was sentenced to death, but the trial had one aspect that sparked outrage of its own. 3 of the survivors were also convicted. Duan, the woman Li Hao had forced to help him kill Zhang under threat of death, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 2 others received suspended sentences. A lawyer who attempted to represent them, Zhang Yan, told the press, "I was in shock when I heard their sentences. They were victims. They endured unimaginable torture for months, and they convicted them." The Chinese judicial system did not find sufficient mitigating circumstances in the fact that they had acted under extreme coercion, locked up, terrified, with no real possibility of resistance. Li Hao was executed on January 21st, 2014. He was 36 years old. A photograph of the entrance to the basement, a narrow, dark tunnel behind a rusted metal door, was released by Chinese police and circulated internationally. It was impossible to imagine that behind that door 6 people had been locked away for months, 2 of whom never made it out alive. What makes this case part of this series isn't just the brutality of what Li Hao did, it's the architecture of the crime. Li Hao didn't improvise. He didn't snap in a moment of rage. He spent years planning. He built physical infrastructure, the basement, the doors, the ventilation, and then he built digital infrastructure, the webcam, the QQ account, the Alipay payment system. What he saw on the internet in 2007 wasn't a distraction or an addiction. It was a business model, and he replicated it with the cold detachment of someone launching a company, not committing a crime. That's what's most disturbing about Li Hao. He's not some incomprehensible monster. He's someone who looked at the internet, saw an opportunity, and made the most calculated and brutal decision possible to capitalize on it. Our next case also starts with a promise, a job offer, an opportunity, a trip. But this time the victim isn't a vulnerable woman in an industrial city. He's a well-known actor, and the place they took him wasn't a basement in Luoyang. It was an entire city built for scamming, in the middle of the Myanmar jungle. I'm talking about Wang Xing. In the previous case, we talked about a man who saw the internet as a business opportunity and built a criminal infrastructure to exploit it. 1 person, 1 basement, 6 victims. Our next case operates on a completely different scale. We're not talking about a basement. We're talking about entire cities, built from scratch in the jungles of Myanmar, with thousands of workers, with human resources departments, with training manuals, with production quotas, and with 220,000 people trapped inside, many of them with no idea how they even got there. January 3rd, 2025. Wang Xing, a 31-year-old Chinese actor with a solid following in his home country, received what looked like the perfect offer. An associate director reached out, promising him an audition for a film. He was told to travel to Bangkok, Thailand, where he would meet the director and do a screen test. Wang had experience in the industry, he had contacts, he had every reason to believe it. He bought his ticket, he got on the plane. When he landed in Bangkok, people were waiting for him. It wasn't the director. There was no audition. They put him in a car. They drove more than 300 miles to the Myanmar border. They crossed, and Wang Xing vanished. To understand what happened to Wang Xing, you have to understand what Southeast Asian scam compounds actually are. It all started with online gambling. In the early 2000s, online casinos were massively popular in China. The Chinese government banned them. The operators didn't disappear, they relocated to Cambodia, the Philippines, Laos, Myanmar. From there, they could keep targeting Chinese citizens with relative impunity. Over time, these criminal groups, primarily Chinese syndicates, started experimenting with new forms of fraud. They discovered that online romance scams were exponentially more profitable than gambling. They didn't need the victim to place a bet, they just needed them to trust. The model they developed is called Sha Zhu Pan in Chinese, literally, pig butchering plate. The concept is simple and brutal. You build a relationship of trust with a victim over weeks or months, posing as a potential love interest, a friend, a business contact. You fatten them up emotionally, and when they're ready, you slaughter them financially, convincing them to invest in fake cryptocurrency platforms or wire money to fraudulent accounts. By 2023, these operations were generating $63.9 billion a year, the equivalent of 40% of the combined GDP of Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. But there was a scaling problem. To operate at that level, they needed massive manpower, thousands of people sitting in front of computers, simultaneously building fake relationships with victims all over the world, speaking English, Spanish, French, Arabic, knowing the local customs of each country, being convincing. How do you get those people? 2 ways. The first, recruit them with promises of well-paying jobs abroad. The second, just kidnap them outright. That's how the compounds were born. Cities within special economic zones in Myanmar and Cambodia, with guaranteed local corruption, no access to outside authorities, and private security guards. Inside, blocks of office buildings, dormitories, cafeterias, surveillance systems, and thousands of workers, some who were lured in voluntarily by false promises, many who were simply abducted. Once you were inside, you couldn't leave. If you didn't meet your scam quotas, you got beaten. If you tried to escape, you got sold to another compound. If your family wanted you back, they had to pay a ransom. Wang Xing arrived at the Apollo compound in the Myawaddy region of Myanmar, one of the largest and most well-known in the area. They shaved his head. They took his phone. They explained the rules. He was going to learn how to scam. He had 3 days of training. Then he would start working. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I didn't even have time to use the bathroom, he later recounted. There were at least 50 other Chinese people in the same place, all in the exact same situation. The compound had everything it needed to function like a legitimate business. Computers, internet access, conversation scripts, training manuals on how to build fake social media profiles, how to identify vulnerable victims, how to guide them toward fraudulent investments. A South African worker rescued from another compound described her experience. They gave me a script and told me to pose as an Asian woman living in Chicago. I had to study the city, learn the everyday details of life there. They punished me if I forgot what neighborhood I lived in, or if I didn't know what a Starbucks was. Wang Xing's family reported him missing immediately. In China, the case exploded on social media within hours. Weibo, WeChat, Douyin. Millions of people following updates in real time. The Chinese government, facing enormous public pressure, pushed Thai authorities to act. 3 days after his disappearance, Thai police located Wang Xing and got him out. They crossed the border, reached the compound, and pulled him out. Images of Wang Xing shaking hands with a Thai police officer in Mae Sot, still with his head shaved, visibly exhausted, spread across China within minutes. But there's a disturbing detail about that rescue. The exact details of the operation were never publicly disclosed. Independent investigators pointed out that the speed of the rescue, 3 days, was unusually fast for a compound in Myanmar. A source close to the case told Chinese media that Wang wasn't rescued in the conventional sense. He was released on the instruction of Wan Kwok Koi, a Macau businessman with ties to Chinese triads who operates throughout Southeast Asia. Apparently, the kidnapping of a well-known actor had generated too much attention and was putting the entire operation at risk. In other words, they let him go because they'd become too visible. What happened after Wang Xing's rescue was equally telling. Within days, a joint petition from 174 families of Chinese citizens missing in Myanmar began circulating on social media, demanding the government do more. A shared spreadsheet posted online for families to log information about their missing loved ones grew from 174 to over 1,200 cases in a matter of days. 1,200 families. 1,200 people missing inside the compounds, and that was only the ones who had someone back in China with access to social media and the willingness to speak publicly. The UN estimated in 2023 that 220,000 people were being held in compounds in Cambodia and Myanmar alone. The global total could exceed 1.5 million. In January 2026, 1 year after the Wang Xing case, China executed 11 members of the Ming family, one of the 4 clans that dominated the compounds in the region alongside the Bai, Liu, and Wei families. In November 2025, 5 members of the Bai family had been sentenced to death in Shenzhen, justice in some form, but the compounds didn't disappear. According to organized crime researchers, every time a compound is shut down or its leaders are arrested, the operation migrates to another border zone, to another country, to another name. The business model is too profitable to die. And the victims, the ones sitting in front of computers, building fake relationships with people all over the world, keep getting replaced because there's always another person who needs a job, another young guy who saw an offer online, another actor who believed there was an audition waiting for him on the other side of the border. There's something about this case that forces you to think about 2 types of victims at the same time. There are the people trapped inside the compounds, kidnapped, beaten, forced to scam under threat of violence, clear and direct victims of a brutal criminal system. And then there are the people on the other side of the screen, the ones who get a message from a potential love interest on a dating app, the ones who spend weeks or months building what they believe is a real relationship, the ones who end up wiring their life savings to an account that vanishes within hours. In 2024, the FBI reported over $9 billion in losses from crypto fraud, the majority tied to pig butchering. A banker from Kansas named Shan Haynes embezzled $47 million from the bank where he worked to cover what he had lost in one of these scams. The system victimizes everyone it touches, the ones working on the inside, and the ones on the other side of the screen, believing that someone out there actually cares about them. Our last case today also involves using an image to deceive, but this time it's not a fake profile on a dating app. It's one of China's most famous artists with millions of real followers, using his fame to get close to victims who trusted him precisely because they knew who he was. I'm talking about Chris Wu. In the previous case, we talked about people who built fake identities to deceive their victims, made up profiles, fabricated personalities, relationships that were never real. But our last case is different in one fundamental way. The man we're about to talk about didn't need a fake identity. He had something far more powerful, a real one, a real name, real fame, millions of real followers, and he used all of it in exactly the same way. If you grew up listening to K-pop in the 2010s, you probably know the name EXO, one of the most successful boy bands in the history of Asian music, with fans across dozens of countries, packed stadiums, albums that shattered sales records within hours. Chris Wu, whose real name is Wu Yifan, was one of EXO's founding members. He was born in 1990 in Guangzhou, China, but grew up in Vancouver, Canada, where he obtained Canadian citizenship. He was tall, photogenic, and spoke Mandarin, English, and Cantonese. In 2014, he split from EXO and launched a solo career that in China was, simply put, stratospheric. He had contracts with Louis Vuitton, Porsche, Bulgari, and more than a dozen luxury brands. He appeared on magazine covers, on billboards across China, in Hollywood films. In 2017, he appeared in Triple X, Return of Xander Cage, alongside Vin Diesel. He had tens of millions of followers on Weibo. He was, without any exaggeration, one of the most recognizable people in China. And behind that image, he had spent years running a system of sexual predation that his own victims took time to recognize, because Chris Wu's fame made everything look like an opportunity, not a trap. On July 8, 2021, a 19-year-old woman named Du Meiju published a series of accusations on Weibo. Du was a beauty industry influencer. She had her own audience, her own platform. She wasn't some faceless voice with no credibility. And what she wrote was direct and specific. She said she had met Chris Wu when she was 17, that he had offered her alcohol, that she had woken up in his bed with no memory of what had happened, and that she wasn't the only one, that at least 7 other women had gone through similar experiences, including 2 who had been binors at the time. What she was describing was a pattern, a system, not an isolated incident. Chris Wu's initial response was exactly what any celebrity with resources would do. He denied everything. His management team put out denials. His fans, a massive and highly organized community, like all Chinese idol fandoms, flooded social media to defend him, attacking Du Meiju, questioning her credibility, accusing her of chasing attention or money, and then Du posted something else. Chris Wu's team had tried to pay her to stay quiet. She had evidence. She published it. The script flipped completely. What came to light in the weeks that followed was the portrait of a carefully designed method. Wu and his team used social media to identify girls, many of them fans, many of them minors, and contacted them with promises of opportunities in the entertainment industry, music collaborations, video appearances, brand contacts. The kind of offer that for a girl with aspirations in the industry was nearly impossible to turn down. They invited them to parties at his apartment in Beijing, invited them to meet him, and there, according to multiple testimonies that emerged during the investigation, they got them drunk. And Wu raved them while they were unconscious or too incapacitated to resist. The system had multiple layers. Wu never made first contact directly. He used intermediaries, members of his team, people whose job was to identify and recruit victims. If something went wrong, Wu had plausible distance. If a victim spoke up, there was an entire PR machine ready to neutralize the threat. It had been working for years. Beijing police detained Chris Wu on July 31st, 2021, less than a month after Du Meiju's accusations. In China, the conviction rate at trial is 99.9%. When police detain someone, the outcome of the process is almost always the same. Wu's arrest was the signal that the judicial system had effectively found him guilty, before the trial had even formally begun. The brands acted immediately. Louis Vuitton, Porsche, Bulgari, and more than a dozen companies cut their contracts with Wu within hours. His videos were removed from Chinese streaming platforms. His songs disappeared from the charts. His photos were wiped from the official social media accounts of every brand that had ever worked with him. In China, when the state decides that someone has ceased to exist culturally, that person literally ceases to exist in the media. Wu was added to a blacklist of 88 celebrities for illegal and immoral activities in November of 2021. Decades of image building, erased in days. The trial was held in June 2022 with no media access. On November 25, 2022, the Chaoyang District Court of Beijing published the verdict on its official Weibo account. Chris Wu was found guilty on 2 counts. The first, rape, specifically having raped 3 women in November and December of 2020 while they were intoxicated and unconscious. The court described them as intoxicated and defenseless. Sentence 11.5 years in prison. The second, group licentiousness, the Chinese legal term for group sexual activity, which in this case referred to an incident on July 1st, 2018. Additional sentence, 22 months. Total, 13 years in prison. Deportation to Canada upon completion of the sentence. On Weibo, the reaction was massive. Many users wrote that they were witnessing history. Wu became the first Chinese idol ever sentenced to such a lengthy term for sexual crimes. Others channeled the same energy they had once used to defend him into celebrating his downfall. That duality, the same platform that had amplified his image now amplifying his conviction, is one of the most revealing ironies of the entire case. But there's something the Chris Wu case exposes that goes beyond the individual crime. It's the system that made it possible for years. The idol industry in China and across Asia is built on a very specific dynamic. The idol as an almost sacred figure untouchable, whose image is manufactured and protected by entire teams of professionals. Fans don't just consume the music, they invest emotionally in the person. They defend the idol as if defending them means defending themselves. That creates an enormous power imbalance between the idol and the people around them, especially the young women who aspire to be close to that world. When Dumezu accused Chris Wu, the fans didn't believe her, not because they had any evidence against her, but because believing her meant accepting that the person they had invested so much in was capable of this. The attack on Du across social media wasn't a rational response to her accusation. It was an emotional response to the collapse of an illusion, and that mechanism, the fandom as a shield, the image as protection, the fame as distance, is exactly what Wu had been exploiting for years. He didn't need a fake identity. He had something more powerful, a real identity that people desperately wanted to believe was good. The appeals court confirmed the 13-year sentence in November 2023. Wu was also fined $64 million for tax evasion, a common practice among Chinese celebrities that the government began actively cracking down on in the wake of his case. Today, Wu is serving his sentence in a prison in China. When he's done, he'll be deported to Canada, the country where he grew up, where he holds citizenship, and where his name no longer means anything. That was China, Volume 2. A government official who saw pornography on the internet in 2007 and built a basement to replicate the model with 6 women locked inside. A criminal industry that operates entire cities in the jungles of Myanmar, tracking thousands of people to scam millions more around the world. And a pop idol who used his fame as a hunting tool for years, while his fans defended him on the very same platforms that would eventually destroy him. 3 cases. 3 completely different ways that the internet and crime became intertwined in China. What did you think of the video? Would you want to see a Volume 3? What other country should I cover next? Let me know in the comments. See you next time.